Welcome into the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk to grandfathers, adult grandchildren, and experts in areas of importance to grandfathers. Whether you're a new grandfather, a seasoned pro, or somebody interested in learning about relationships, this is the place for you. So come on in, join us as we learn together, laugh together, and support each other on the Cool Grandpa Podcast. Welcome in. I'm hoping that wherever you are, you're having a fantastic day and a fantastic weekend if you're listening to this on Friday when it typically comes out. A couple of things I want to go over first before we jump in. One is if you have Google Podcast as the way that you're listening to a lot of your podcasts, you've probably seen the announcements that they're going away in April. I think Google/Alphabet are pushing all of their content over into YouTube. So YouTube is probably the place where you're going to want to go and listen and watch podcasts. The other thing too is I think Apple has recently changed up some of their algorithms. So if you haven't listened to the show for a little while on Apple, be sure to go over, download the show, listen to it. Also, that's the same if you use Apple Podcasts for any of your other podcasts that you listen to. Make sure you go over there, refresh that, get back into the algorithms so that those start to show back up on your list of podcasts. I want to also remind you that I've got a great way you can help support the podcast, and that is go to buymeacoffee.com. And I've got a link in the show notes. It's right next to the podcast episodes over on the right-hand side. Quick, easy way you can contribute $5, $10 or more, and that helps to go to offset the cost of just monthly publishing and subscription fees and some of these things that I've got to expense on my side. So any support you provide for me through Buy Me a Coffee, I really do appreciate it. I want to talk to you a little bit about this week's guest. Jeff Williams is joining us, and Jeff is a fantastic guy. It turns out we kind of grew up and lived in the same area of Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia at different times, went to high schools, rivals, down the road from each other. And so it's been great to get to know Jeff that way. Jeff is running a business called Bizstarters, and this is where he really focuses in and helps people in their 50s, 60s, 70s. So, older Gen Xers and, of course, baby boomers. If you're looking to start a second business, an Encore career, let's say, or an Encore business, Jeff is the person, and his team really is focused on helping you set that up. They're very action oriented. So as you get to know and hear more from Jeff, it's not one of these places where you come in and you take a long time thinking up a concept. It's not a long time to think about the business. They do everything for you from just the conception, evaluation, and working with coaches to, what's your concept? What are you doing this? What's your goals? And then they go all the way through the virtual incubator startup program. So you might want for an Encore business, something that provides a few tens of thousands of dollars a year that helps fund some of your activities and hobbies. You might want time freedom. You might want some other things, but you're not quite ready just to hang it up. Jeff and his team do a fantastic job of helping people out. I've got links to Jeff's business starters or Bizstarters down in the show notes, as well as he's got a new program, a series that he's launching on TikTok called The Joy of Being an Encore Entrepreneur. So all those links, everything's down in the show notes. I know I've been talking for a little while, so let's jump in and enjoy this conversation with Jeff Williams from Bizstarters. Hi, Jeff. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I'm excited to have you on to talk about these second careers, let's say, of people as we start to get older.
Hi, Greg. Thank you for having me.
I want to jump back a little bit and have you tell us the story about what was going on when you started Bizstarters, because from reading your background and talking to you a little bit, you were pretty successful senior vice president and were doing a lot of big corporate things, but then you decided to pivot. So I'd love to hear that story.
Well, at the end of my corporate career, I was working for a small company. I'd gone from a $6 billion company to a $6 million company, primarily because I knew at that point, it was my late 30s, that I wanted to be self-employed someday. And there were some certain skill areas that I needed to fill in. And working for a small company, you get to do a little of everything. I was approaching my 40th birthday, and it became apparent that I was not going to get any equity in the company. The owner of the company was going to probably leave it to his daughters, and sometime not too far into the future, I was going to be left hanging out there. So I decided that I would launch my own company. So I launched my first company at age 40, which was a marketing consultancy. And while I was doing that, I started offering a couple of small business classes. This is in the late 80s at a local community college. And the word got out I was doing this. And when the 1990 recession hit, I was approached by a federally funded job training agency here in Chicago who asked me to provide self-employment training for downsized corporate managers. And I did that for most of the 90s in addition to my consulting work. But by the end of the 90s, that money was running out, and I needed a new way to continue to market my business startup services. I had, late 90s, had learned a little bit about this thing called the internet and decided that this would give me access to a worldwide marketplace from my computer. So in 1999, I got some private equity capital to invest and registered the domain name Bizstarters. And in spring of 2000, I launched Bizstarters. So it was really an evolution of something I'd started about 9 years before.
Well, and I think we see that a lot of times when we look back at the lives of different entrepreneurs, right? Is that idea of evolving, of pivoting is something that seems to be pretty common. But I think sometimes, especially in business school, we tend to sometimes think about just the one thing that a person did, right? It's like, Bill Gates didn't do anything other than he just started Microsoft, when in fact there were some other things along the way, some different interests. And so it's interesting to hear that you've gone through that evolution, but then also being able to have that background in corporate and that whole startup process, because that's what ends up helping so many other people as they transition and need to pivot, is hearing those stories that you have. One thing that I'd love to find out is, what are some of the drivers for some of the people that want to start an Encore business and move into a different phase of life even?
Well, I'd say probably the number one motivation is when somebody leaves corporate, either voluntarily or involuntarily, and they're still in their 50s. They're not ready to retire for a number of reasons, not least of which is they like working. There's still work they like to do that they want to continue doing. And also there's the money issue. I mean, the reality is that a lot of older Gen Zs and boomers just don't have enough money saved. So they really can't step away in their 50s or even early 60s. So this is probably the number one motivating factor, is they are going to see a transition in their work life. And they're looking for a way to continue to do work and be compensated for it. And that's what we help them do. We help them transition from a successful corporate career to a fun new life as entrepreneurial business owner.
And I think too is that when you were talking about the recession in 1990 and even the experience as a Gen Xer that I saw, where my dad was right-sized, laid off, whatever you want to call it, in the 80s, is that idea of having a little bit more ownership of your career, of the direction that you're going. And even if you're working for corporate, still having that mindset, I think a little bit that you're responsible for the paycheck that you're bringing in, because Ford could lay you off any minute now, or CDW, or whoever, they could make a change. And so you're not as stable. And we saw that as kids, Gen Xers, and then certainly boomers experienced that through the 80s, 90s, and beyond.
Well, you're very right. There's a phrase that you read about for top executives called the golden parachute, which is typically some type of exit package. I just read that the CFO of a major corporation is leaving with $26 million. That's his golden parachute. Well, most upper middle managers don't have a golden parachute. The best thing we can do is to know how to do something entrepreneurial. If suddenly we're not in the corporate world anymore, so that we can continue to make money at work we're good at. So this is like our equivalent of the golden parachute.
Oh, yeah. You have to build your own these days. You can't just rely on, like you said, getting a few months or years of severance plus stock plus some other things as a parting gift, let's say.
No, you're very right. You have to be self-reliant about that. And to tell you the truth, the boomers in particular really started this whole thing called workaholic. I mean, I remember back in my 20s when I was first out of college, I worked in ungodly hours to try to advance my corporate career. My dad, who was Depression era guy and worked for the federal government, he never worked overtime. He almost never brought work home. He rarely ever worked on Saturday. I did all of that, as you probably did too early in your career. So you get now to 55, 56 years old, you're leaving corporate, your mindset is very heavily oriented around working. And for some people, unfortunately, it's their whole life. Thank God I never had that problem. But so boomers in particular are just used to working. And suddenly, even if they don't need the money, they still want to be engaged. So,
oh, sure. I mean, we hear all the time those stories, and it's almost a cliche where somebody retires from an organization and then they're dead in 2 or 3 years afterwards. And it seemed like they just lost purpose.
That can happen.
Now, I would like to talk to you a little bit about some of the demographics, and we certainly have touched on the baby boomers and even some of the older Gen X crowd. But what are some of the demographics that you're seeing? What's the age and work experience, location, some of those things?
Sure. Well, our average, I hate to use average because nobody's average, but our average or typical client's about 56 years old. About 65% men, 35% women. And let me just say something about that. We would like to work with more female entrepreneurs. Statistics tell us that 50% of women over age 50 are single, either divorced, widowed, or never married. And therefore, they're responsible for their financial future on their own. And we would like to have more people step up, more women step up and do this. As far as demographics, most of our clients were in corporate settings. It's pretty rare to have someone who hadn't worked for 10 years and then they come to us and say, I want to start a business, and they do it. There is one exception, one category, and that is we have helped some people turn craft hobbies into full-time businesses through our virtual incubator program. And some of these people weren't really working full-time in corporate before they came to us. They were working the craft business on the side. But typically, our people are working full-time in corporate. As far as where they're located, we have a lot of concentration in the Sunbelt states, which pretty much fits national statistics. I think the number one rated area in the United States last year for business startup was North Carolina. When I first started this 30 years ago, I had trouble selling business startup training here in Chicago, where I'm based. Wasn't a very entrepreneurial city then, but it's changed drastically. Today, we have a very vivid and robust entrepreneurial community in Chicago, and I can sell the program pretty effectively here. But initially, it was a lot of Sunbelt. Plus, we do some work overseas. I picked up a client recently for Northern Ireland. So this is the power of the web.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's interesting that reach and how far you can go just by having that website up. I mean, somebody in Singapore could be looking around for entrepreneurial training, and they stumble across your website, and then they're able to connect with you that way. I would love to hear the story about, I think it was back in 2003, the tour of Northwestern's business incubator, and how that also played into you getting the virtual incubator up and going.
Glad to talk about that. I got an MBA from Northwestern here in Evanston, Illinois, and they, for many years, had run something called the business incubator, which is a building that provides low-cost rent to startup businesses, but they also provide them with a lot of other support. Well, at this particular time, they were having trouble getting tenants, so they recruited a number of MBA grads from various age groups to tour the building and try to come up with some ideas on how to recruit. And as I walked around the building, I thought to myself, we're doing everything they do in this building except provide the space. And our clients don't need the space. They already have a home office. So it popped into my head that day that I would call this program Virtual Incubator. And I trademarked it and got a logo done. And now I've been using it for 21 years.
That's a great story. It was interesting that whole time of the late 90s and early 2000s, because I was an MBA student myself and was working as a grad assistant for the university, and we had the industrial engineering program. And so all the tools that were starting to come out, the virtual whiteboards, the actual being able to meet with each other, upload data files, and being able to have that reach. We had professors in North Carolina that had students in Australia where they would be able to film parts of manufacturing and then be able to send that in for review and critique and all of that. And it was amazing how many of those tools were starting to really come of age at that time to, like we were talking about, really bring people in. So you didn't have to be right in the Chicago area to come in and take advantage of virtual incubator. You could be somewhere else.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you, I remember the first time 12 years ago, I spoke to somebody in Australia who had indicated interest. I mean, I got to tell you, I've been around a lot of places in my life, and I'm not an unsophisticated person, but I was blown away by that.
Oh, yeah.
Here I am, this little guy in Chicago, talking to this prospective client in Australia. I'm not going to say I take it for granted today, but now, we've done business with people all over North America. Our process works very successfully at a distance because it's based on fundamental approach to starting a business that works for any kind of business. So it doesn't really matter where you are. I will tell you, however, that when I had this client in Northern Ireland, I had to get up at 6:00 in the morning to talk to this guy because of the time zone difference. So that was a bit inconvenient, but yeah, you're right. It's technology is wonderful.
I wanted to have you talk a little bit about the difference between what Bizstarters and your virtual incubator does versus some of the other businesses that just solely focus on setting people up in a franchise. Because I think sometimes we see a lot of ads, we hear a lot of things about, hey, this is perfect if you're going into retirement, buy a franchise and work on that. But I'd love to hear a little bit of the difference that you have compared to those organizations.
I've done quite a bit of investigation in the franchise industry in order to be able to answer this question intelligently. We're really two different worlds. In the franchise world, when you buy a franchise, you are buying somebody's business model. Somebody created it. It might have started as a single retail outlet, and then they franchised it. Now they're offering it around the country. But basically, you're buying their dream, their plan, their vision, and their business plan, and their operations plan. And under most franchise agreements, you are absolutely required to follow their plan, or you're in trouble. Well, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. I would say this is appeals more to people who want to become a business manager as opposed to an entrepreneur. Now, virtual incubator, on the other hand, we take someone's dream, their vision, their long-held interest, and we help them create their own business model. How will they sell it? To whom will they sell it? What will they charge? How will they promote it? All of that we help them create during the virtual incubator program. So that it's their vision being put into action, their operations plan being put into action. Now, it may take them a bit longer to make this really start working well for them than it does in a franchise situation, but they don't have anybody else telling them what to do. So we tend to work better with free spirited type people who want to do their own thing and have a vision for doing it. So that's really the big difference between franchise and virtual incubator.
Okay, that makes sense. I think you brought that up. It's that trade-off, right? You can buy in to an already functioning, hopefully, business model and operations plan and just kind of run the template that's given to you, or you can have that creativity side. You can figure out what you want to do, how you want to do it, and then really own that whole execution side of things.
Yes, you're right.
Now, who are some of the best people to fit working with Bizstarters and virtual incubators? Is it really type A folks that are, senior VPs, or can people be successful working with you that might be a little bit more reserved and maybe weren't, let's say, very high level executives?
Sure. We can work with a wide variety of people. And let me talk about the being shy aspect of this, because I've had a number of clients who came to me and said, Jeff, I like what you're doing here, but I'm a little reluctant to do anything entrepreneurial because I'm kind of a soft-spoken, quiet person. I say, hey, you can find a business that works for you. There are certain businesses that you can do successfully where you don't have to really deal with the public a lot. For example, e-commerce business, you don't really talk to the public all that much. They go to your website, they like what they see, they order the product, you ship it to them, and maybe send them a thank you note. And unless you have a problem, you don't really have to talk to people. So that works perfectly fine for someone who is kind of soft-spoken, wants to be themselves. Now, in my case, I'm a very outgoing person. I need to be around people and talk to people. So that's one of the reasons I was in sales for a lot of my career. So I would never be satisfied with a business where I couldn't be out and around. Well, I found my niche. So I would say there are three basic characteristics that we see on people that are most successful. Number one is they've got provable experience and performance in the business they want to go into. They didn't just think this up last week. They didn't just pick a business because their brother-in-law said that he'd read you can make a lot of money at it. This is the first question we ask people. How are you coming with this business idea? And in many cases, our clients were awarded some type of a meritorious award in the corporate world for what they've done. So there's really a very tangible way to prove this. The second thing is that our best clients are people that are very realistic about how the business will fit into their overall life plan that they have for themselves. Because when people leave corporate in their 50s or 60s, they want to, usually they have a pretty clear idea or an evolving idea what they want to do with their life. They want to have a certain amount of free time. They want to be able to travel a certain time of the year. They want to be able to go visit their grandkids. They want to be able to give back to the local community. They have an idea for all this. So the people we do best with are people that say, hey, I'm willing to put 25 hours a week in on my business because I want to do these other things. They tend to do quite well. And number three, which is really critically important, is you have to agree to be coached. Some people have an ego problem with coaches. They just can't handle it, and they don't do well with us. So you got to be willing to be coached.
Yeah, you can't talk to somebody that's already the expert on everything. I even remember that as a little league coach myself, is the kids that already knew how to do everything couldn't help them out. And so being humble enough to take that advice and being able to look at things at a different perspective, being able to be led is super important. And probably something you can figure out in the first meeting or two with somebody. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you can I just ask them straight out. I just say, hey, um, are you willing to be coached? Because I'll tell you that most of our clients have been coached in something in their life before they come to us. It could have been sports coaching back in high school and college. Like me, I played football in high school, so I knew coaching and teamwork. Or it could have been professional coaching in the corporate world, could have been a mentor of some kind. It's very rare for us to have a successful client who hasn't been coached in something before they come to us. So I just say, hey, are you prepared to be coached for the next 90 days and to follow what we suggest? Because we know this works. We've done this 300 times. We know it works. If they say, I don't know, I say, hey, thanks, no thanks. And we part ways amicably.
Sure. That makes sense. Can you walk me through the process of how somebody finds you on the internet, they discover or they want to try the virtual incubator, and then going through that process of getting a business up off the ground?
Well, our main communications tool is our website, which is at www.bizstarters.com. And the website consists of a couple of key parts. On the home page, the first page, if you scroll down just a short distance on the page, we have about a 1.5-minute video that really encapsulates the program. But I would just say this about Virtual Incubator. It's designed to let our clients do what they do best, and then we do the rest. That's our slogan. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's say that you want to be a consultant on health and safety in manufacturing plants. That's your business concept. And in fact, I bring that up because we had a client who does that. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is, are you really quite experienced at doing that? Well, in the case of the client I'm speaking of, he had 25 years experience. He was award winning. He'd been president of the Health and Safety Managers Association in Michigan. There were all these things that indicated to us that he was really good at it. So that's the first thing we're trying to look at here. But anyway, on our homepage, it's got a video. It explains how we go about this, because what we do is we have the client and the coach primarily focus on a marketing strategy, because that's based on what they really know well. What are you going to sell? To whom are you going to sell it? Why will they buy? And what will you charge for it? That's the primary work we do for the first 6 weeks. Now, once you come up with a marketing strategy and the name for the business, then we bring in our support team who work in parallel with the coach. And while the coach and the client are working on the strategy for the first 6 weeks, our support team is getting you a logo design, registering your domain name, designing a website, launching your website, writing selling copy for your website, getting a LinkedIn business page done. All of that's being done in the first 6 weeks of the program. So our mission really is to help you do what you do best, and then we'll do the rest. So we do not waste your time having you do things that other people can do better.
Oh.
So let me tell you how we get started here. I have almost never sold Virtual Incubator to anybody without talking to them on the phone first. It's quite a commitment of time and some money. So throughout our website, all over our website, you'll find it several dozen times on every page. There are links to go to my online calendar. I personally handle all interviews with prospective clients, no matter where they're located. And no matter what coach they work with eventually, I talk to everybody first. And I find out what's their vision, what's their dream. I find out how quickly they want to start. I find out how much time they can put in. And then we talk a bit about what the program offers in the pricing. And if it looks like it's a good fit, then we send them a written description of exactly what we'll do for them. So you always have it in writing before you have to commit to anything. And if you say yes, then we ask for an initial deposit, and within 2 weeks, we're getting started. So that's how the program works.
I like the idea of keeping people focused on what they do. That's something that even going back to probably both of our corporate examples in lives, one of the things I did was implement transportation software and manage transportation to organizations that They didn't do that. They manufactured X, but they had a transportation arm. We came in and we took that over and managed that for them so they could focus on what they do best. And it's the same thing that I'm hearing that you help individuals do, is stay focused on what they do, take out some of these other things that sometimes cost a lot of money, cost a lot of time to focus on, and free them up to be focused and just dive into their planning, their execution. No, that's a great way to do it, because like I said, I know a lot of people that spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to do a website themselves when that's not what they do. That's not what their background is.
No, it's really a giant waste of time, because we do websites for under $600 a piece, really good ones too, because we figured out a formula for doing it. Doesn't make any sense to try to do this. Now, let me mention one thing before we move on here. You said, how are we different from other people? First of all, we are one of the very few nationally marketed business startup programs out there. There are not too many of them. The U.S. Small Business Administration has a very robust website for Encore entrepreneurs, and they have some really good resources. And as a matter of fact, I sometimes refer people to the website, but they're really not very well equipped to stick with you for 90 days. They don't really have the manpower to do that. They have what they call small business development centers, which you probably know about. They're all over the United States, and they're quite good. But you're lucky if you can get one or two appointments there, and then they got to move on. Well, in Virtual Incubator, we're with you. You have your personal business coach by your side every week for 90 days. Many of our competitors are what you would call business coaches, and they can tell you, for example, that you need a really good identity for your business, but they can't help you do it. We do. We do not tell you how to do things. We help you do things. Big difference, I think.
Because at the end of the day, it's got to be somebody happy with what the product is, and it has to represent them and their values, what they like to see, and what's going to attract their clients. It can't be just a cookie cutter, or like we were talking about, somebody going out there that has an accounting background that wants to do something along the finance lines, and then they're sitting there trying to be super creative and build out a website, build out a sales funnel, things that just aren't in their skill set and wheelhouse.
No, you're absolutely right.
Is the virtual incubator and the online course, are those the only resources that you guys offer, or are there more resources that are offered through Bizstarters?
Yes, we do have quite a few other resources. My basic outlook on this business is I never want to say no to someone. If someone comes to me by email or phone or personal introduction, and we chat for a bit about their entrepreneurial interest, it just doesn't look like now's the right time for them, I don't want to just blow them off and say, go away. I don't do that. It's not my personality. So we put together quite a few resources. If you go to the Bizstarters website, there's a navigation command that's described as the Business Resource Center. We're always adding new things to that. We've got case studies. We've got assessment tools. We've got one really great report, 10 Great Reasons to Start a Business After 50. There's some really surprising things in there that people did not know. And when they read it, they get really inspired. So yeah, we're continually adding to that. Plus, I have a webinar that I do at least once a quarter called 10 Great Reasons to Start a Business After 50. I do it on Zoom. It's free, no obligation. I market it through my social media and through other people that I know. And I get 10, 15 people on that call every time I do it. And it's a great time to get to know me and to ask any question you want. We spend at least a half an hour on every webinar just taking Q&A. The third thing that we do is I have another company. I have a sister company to Bizstarters called Biz Boosters. And that does business growth coaching. So once you've launched your business and you've been around for 2 or 3 years, chances are, if you're running it by yourself or with a small staff, there are going to be projects you just never get done. You keep meaning to do them, and they don't get done. And maybe because you don't know how to do them. So we step in usually on a 90-day engagement for a relatively modest consulting fee, and we get things done for people. I've worked with about 100 clients in Biz Boosters, Right now, I'm concentrating on clients in Chicago, but I deal with people all over North America. So that's out there. Now, you may say, well, why is that a sweet spot? Well, 52% of all small businesses in the United States are owned by somebody over 50. People don't know this. We are not only important startup entrepreneurs, but we're also important in owning businesses. And I find it's a really good fit. It's a peer-to-peer thing. We're boomer to boomer, and we kind of have a similar past. We get along really well on this. So yeah, we have continually adding to our resources.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I would love to hear your thoughts about why you think that it's people over 50 that tend to be successful or have successful businesses that are going. Is there a key there versus somebody that's, let's say, 40 or 30? But 50 seems to be kind of a sweet spot.
Right. Well, let's compare it to, say, the 30-something, because there's less difference between the 40 and the 50 than there is between the 30 and the 50. I think there's two or three things that I've observed, and I know I had it myself. Number one, by the time you're in your mid-50s, you've been in the corporate world probably 30 years, and you've had ups and downs. I mean, I remember the first time I got passed by for a promotion when I was 30 years old. I was crestfallen about that. I mean, I was broken up emotionally, but got over it and was downsized one time when I was in my 30s. Came totally out of the blue. Anyway, you learn to rebalance yourself, and I think that's really important because everything doesn't work the way you plan it to when you start a business. I mean, that's pretty self-evident, I think. But second thing is that you have learned how to deal with a wide variety of people by the time you're in your 50s. Either that or they fired you by that point because you didn't get along with anybody. Okay. This is important. I deal with a wide variety of people between vendors, influencers, prospective clients. In a given month, I talk to all kinds of personalities, and I'm pretty good at figuring out how to get along with them because I had to do it in my career. The third thing is people in their 50s have some money. Hopefully, they put some money aside. And we're looking at a process where our typical client is investing less than $10,000 in total their first year in business. Most people can do that out of personal savings because I've had some people come to me and say, do you help your clients get bank loans? Well, we don't because you can't get them. They don't lend to startups, and you don't need it. For $10K, you can do it. So I would say those are the three primary things I see that help make the 50-plussers really successful.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I like to also think back, too, about some of the people that started so many businesses in their 50s, right? I mean, you got Ray Kroc with Chicago and McDonald's, and then you even have Colonel Sanders, and you have so many people that started big empires. I think Sam Walton was in his late 40s when he got Walmart started. And so it is something where, too, I think it's important if you're in your 50s or beyond and you think like, well, things have kind of passed me by. They really haven't. You're actually primed to be successful because of that experience that you've had and you've banked in your life.
No, you're very right.
Is there anything about Bizstarters or anything around the virtual incubator that I haven't asked you that you'd like to bring up?
Well, let me talk just for a minute about being an Encore entrepreneur. And what does Encore entrepreneur mean? Well, it's a phrase made up by the business media. Some reporter made it up. And what it basically means is anybody over 50 who does something entrepreneurial. It's kind of used in place of the word boomer because today a lot of business startups are actually Gen Xers. They're not boomers. But let me just talk for a minute about this because I think there's some wonderful things that come into your life when you're an Encore entrepreneur. One of them is giving back. I know you and I talked about this in our preliminary interview and how this is important to you. It's important to me. I want to be an important part of my local community. And my last decade as a corporate manager, I had no time to do anything outside. I was traveling. Didn't get home till 8:30 at night because I had to commute in Chicago, and I had to give up charity work, church work. I even had to give up coaching Little League, which you used to coach. Um, I was not happy about this. Well, when it came self-employed, I made a promise to myself that I would work out my schedule so that I could recommit. And you can do this when you're self-employed. You have control over your schedule most of the time, not always. I mean, from time to time, I have a client who'll call me up and insist that we meet that day. And then I have to change everything around. But that's rare.
Mm-hmm.
So number one, I think it's really important that you can give back as an entrepreneur. Secondly, it's been shown time and time again that you age more gracefully if you stay mentally prepared and mentally committed. And running a business certainly keeps you mentally committed, doesn't it?
It does.
You know this, Greg.
It does.
I mean, there's not a day goes by you're not thinking, okay, I don't understand this. I got to learn this. Matter of fact, I made a promise to myself 30 years ago that as best as I could, I would learn something new every week that I was in business. And sometimes it's something about myself. Sometimes it's about something elsewhere. So I think the second thing is that running your own business keeps you very intellectually challenged. And I think it extends your life. And the third thing is that you can do a lot of good by helping people through your business. People have problems they want solved. And you can use your skills to solve these problems. In my case, I help people find a way to keep working until that point in life when they're ready to really retire, which could be 10 years into the future. That's what we do with Virtual Incubator. We give them a feasible, lucrative alternative to keep working those years until they're ready to really step away. And I feel really good about this.
And I love the fact that, the theme that I'm getting through all this is that you're in control of the business, you're in control of your time, you're in control of where you put your resources. And those resources are time and money. It's also your emotional resources that can be put towards family, because we talked about grandparents having that ability to be able to go and visit and stay for more than a long weekend. Because they don't have to get back to a job. They set themselves up to be able to spend that quality time with kids and grandkids. And so this is awesome. And again, the best way for folks to reach out to you is to go to bizstarters.com and then use the contact form on there, or there's some other ways you want folks to get in touch.
It says there's obvious buttons all the way from the top of the homepage throughout, where, to click, it says get scheduled. But what I would suggest people do is go to Bizstarters and scroll down just a little bit on the page, and you'll find our video. It's just about a minute and a half long. It really encapsulates this complete wraparound that we do for you, where, you work on that one thing you're really good at, and we do the rest. The video really talks about that. So I would suggest, number one, come to the website, look at the video, and then click and say, I want to schedule a time with you. And you can pick any time you want on the calendar, and it's no obligation. I do not do hardcore selling on these calls. I just want to meet you and find out if there's a connection there. If there is, then we'll talk about next steps. But don't be worried that you're going to get on the call, because I will tell you this, with some franchise organizations, they get you on the phone. They will not give up until you say yes. And I don't like that. I don't buy that. So anyway, go to Bizstarters, look at the video, then request a call with me, and we'll get to know each other.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I like that approach too, because there's some people that are just wanting some information and wanting to talk to somebody because maybe there's a question that's not answered on the website, maybe, whatever that is, being able to talk to you directly and just be able to find out, is the timing right? Are they set up to engage with you? Whatever that is, that some of that information is the only thing you get by talking with an actual person.
No, you're right. I mean, it's There's nothing like person-to-person connection. And I will tell you, this is particularly important with people over 50. We may call this virtual incubator, but most of us in that age range, we don't like dealing totally in the virtual world, like some younger people do. We like to have flesh and blood. And, we'll have a Zoom call. You'll see me on camera. You'll see me, talking to you. That personal connection is really important for the over 50 crowd. And I'm glad to be able to provide it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Jeff, I've had you on for a little while. Is there anything else that you would like to bring up that maybe we haven't touched on?
I would just want to encourage your listeners that there are so many different entrepreneurial options today. You can do it, as my wife coined this phrase, you can do it part-time, full-time, or just sometime. It doesn't have to be a full-time retail business where you have ungodly hours. You can do a little training business on the side, 15 hours a week, and make $30K a year.
Right.
You can do that today.
Right.
So there's a stroke for every folk.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
to speak. So I just want to encourage people, don't be reluctant to look into this, even if you don't think you're a particularly entrepreneurial person, because there is an option for you.
Oh, that's great. And folks, please be sure to reach out to Jeff, even like I said, and like he said, even if it's just you want more information and you need to, find out if the timing's right, if, you're set up to be somebody that can start this Encore entrepreneur, this other business that you have, reach out to Jeff. These guys are awesome, and they've been helping a lot of people for a long time. So, Jeff, thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. I really have enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Greg.
It was great having Jeff on. I really do appreciate him talking to us about what his organization does, how they help grandfathers, grandparents that really want to be able to have a business, a purpose, something that they're still being active in, that's still using skill set that they've acquired over the years, and being able to marry that up with what their time expectations are, what their income expectations are. Some of us are wanting something that keep us busy for 15, 20, 30 hours a week. And then some people want something that's going to keep them busy for 40, 60 hours a week. Just depends on your personality, depends on your circumstances. But I think Jeff did a great job of walking us through that. I also enjoyed learning about how his organization has been around for well over 30 years, how they started out with being able to transition middle managers, upper managers that were involved in layoffs, in right sizing, in cost saving measures, whatever you want to call it. When companies were shedding off and learning that employees are a good way to cut costs, he was there to help make many of those transitions as painless as possible. From there, he, of course, transitioned over into helping a lot of us baby boomers and now older Gen Xers start to really figure out what we want to do in this next stage of life, how having a business, having a purpose can really line us up for success and make sure that this phase of life is enjoyable and fulfilling for us. So I hope you got a lot out of this. I really enjoyed listening to Jeff. Please go down to the show notes, check out that TikTok series that Jeff has, as well as be sure to go to Bizstarters, connect with Jeff, connect with his team. If you're thinking about what's going to be next, if you're coming up on retirement, if you've entered in retirement, but you still want to stay in the game. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Please be sure to share it with some friends and family members who would also benefit from hearing about Jeff and Bizstarters. And until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.